my first with you. Okay. My name is Rachel Haskell, and I'm a member of one of the, I suppose, community groups. Perhaps rather Freudian slip, Colonel, when you listed all the organizations that you consulted, and I must have been a dozen or 15. And then you said, and even community groups. I think that's perhaps the way a lot of us feel. I know you don't feel that way. That's the way we feel many times. So I have a rather broad, sweeping, if you want to call it question or observation. The lingering feeling that we ordinary citizens have is that we're going to be left holding the bag. When the Army moves out, there's going to be a tremendous price to be paid, for cleaning up, because the cleanup is so monumental that the Army will have been gone, and we taxpayers of California are here, and we're going to pay for that cleanup. Now, I've had the privilege of riding with some Army people and other people around that vast area. Where's that now? That great big lump down to the bottom, those thousands of acres. I have ridden around in that park. And it would boggle your mind. And those of you who are used to it, I guess, don't get boggled. But I was, and the size of it. And the enormity of cleaning that mess up. We were with some Army people because they were retired, who said they used to have squadrons, or whatever they're called, who fired at each other so much that one time would have to go back and hide because the other shells were falling all over, and then it was the other side, turned with all these. They're all lying out there, I guess. I don't know how many you've taken out. Now, the fences were down. Children were playing in there. There had been signs, but the signs had been taken for souvenirs. In many cases, they told me, by the road crews that came through there to do some work on the roads. Took them and put them in their family rooms. Danger, keep out. I'm digressing too much. I know you've had problems, but the condition was deplorable. People were driving four-wheel drives in there. They had a little racetrack set up in a place that plainly said, danger, ordinance, keep out. It was a public playground. Now, I don't know how much of that you're even capable of cleaning up in the time frame. Maybe you do. But it is a monumental job. And then I go to one little specific thing for the Chancellor, if I may. Then I'll shut up. One of the small parts of this vast endeavor is a strawberry field. Is it 200 acres? Am I wrong? How many acres? I understand it is raising.
Well, we don't have a strawberry field yet.
But isn't there land for that? It's supposed to be.
We're negotiating.
Well, what I'm going to say right out front and very strong is that a number of us feel very strongly about methyl bromide, and I don't care about Senator Mello's bill that he just put through. It is an affront to the whole world that we in this beautiful garden spot of the world are going to continue to destroy the very ozone. You're a man of science, you know that. I ain't have to go right with that. I would like you to use those 200 acres or whatever they are as an experimental thing to show the farmers here we can raise strawberries without polluting the universe. Okay?
And maybe we respond immediately to that. Professor Gill would like to say something about it.
As everyone has said, one of the objectives of the university's involvement at Fort Ord is to be engaged in the industry of the region. From the Sentinel, I would say another way in which this is of interest to Santa Cruz County is that in trying to identify all of those market areas, it's trying to market the region. It's trying to say that it's not just property in Fort Ord, it's property around the region where those regional institutions have benefits. One of those is obviously agriculture, and one of those kinds of research involves strawberries. And one of those kinds of research involving strawberries is the way in which agriculture impacts the environment. Now, one way that could be done is to see whether strawberries can be grown without methyl bromide. Another way it could be done is to evaluate the way in which agriculture impacts the groundwater. Another is the way in which methyl bromide is used. Any range of research topics that affect regional agriculture are the kinds of reasons why we would seek an agricultural interim use of university property. So it's possible, in fact, that
We
one...
know what methyl bromide does. We don't have to research it.
You know, actually, for example, whether the effect of methyl bromide on ozone, stratospheric ozone.
Is that still a question in your mind?
Yes.
I didn't think it was in the whole world.
So before we even became engaged in that, we talked with those people whose science was involved in evaluating the effect on ozone. and found out that there is need for a lot of research at a commercial scale with agriculture to find out how, in fact, methyl bromide is used.
How about
It would-
using methyl bromide until the research is done?
So there are lots of ways in which that we are trying to explore how that property could be used. One of them would be to explore commercial scale alternatives too. One way is to explore commercial scale with agriculture to find out how, in fact, methyl bromide is used.
How about
It would-
using methyl bromide until the research is done?
So there are lots of ways in which that we are trying to explore how that property could be used. One of them would be to explore commercial scale alternatives too. One way is to explore commercial scale ways to reduce release of. And so that there are multiple ways in which that property could be used to do research that's applicable to that environmental concern.
Well, it seems to me there was a period of time within which this was supposed to already have been determined, and that time has now been extended.
You mean methyl bromide specifically?
Right. And now that time has been extended. What's been happening in all these years, and what assurance are we going to have that these activities will really be addressed, these issues will be addressed?
I mean, what I'd recommend is, those of you who want to talk about that, let's talk about that subsequently rather than use all of it.
The point is that if you have not entered into any agreement to do strawberries, but if you do, you possibly could be doing it without methyl bromide. The whole purpose of strawberries is not to grow strawberries on your property, but to use it as a research plot. Is that correct? Let me answer the other. Rachel, on the cleanup, the Army can't pull out of this. It's forever responsible. And in the law, you can't even transfer any real estate. You couldn't transfer your house if someone thought there was contaminants under that ground to anybody unless you cleaned it up. So all property in California at the time of transfer has to be clean. You can lease it with the once you have a plan and you say the plan is going to clean it up and here's an acceptable plan where you agree that you do this, so get it clean. So a lot of the what we've been trying to do at Fort Ord is remember that the biggest problem is deterioration of buildings. We have lots of groups that want those buildings today. They've had to wait until the cleanup has occurred. And the homeless population is the biggest benefactor of this cleanup because we've been able to make sure that if you're going to clean up, concentrate first where the homeless population can come in. And we've been able to convey those properties. But of your question or statement that the Army will leave here, first of all the Army that's left, that's leaving is left. What's left over is the housing for the Naval Postgraduate School Defense Scientists to the Department of Defense and the Coast Guard. The property cannot be transferred until it's cleaned up, and the unexploded ordnance is if one was ever discovered after the transfer went to BLM, it's still